Hey everyone, I'm Zach Slater, and this is Let Me Know How It Is, a podcast that discusses comic books, movies, television, and animation. This is the first of our Spotlight series where we look back on a particular show, movie, or creator. Today we spotlight the Disney animated series Gargoyles. I hope you like it. Alright, so Disney has just launched their streaming service, Disney Plus, and as a result, a hashtag Keep Binging Gargoyles campaign has just begun on Twitter, similar to the Keep Binging Young Justice campaign that ultimately brought that show back. So, it just seems like a perfect time to talk about this series, I'm thinking. So, I'm Zach Slater.
I'm Frank Melman.
I'm Tommy Smithereens.
I'm Clifton.
Okay, so just to catch up anybody who is not aware. So Gargoyles was an animated series produced at Disney that ran from 1994 to 1997 for 2 seasons, and then was rebranded as the Goliath Chronicles for its 3rd season. The show credits no creator, but producer Greg Weissman, is the name you're going to hear a lot in this episode, is widely considered at the very least the show's co-creator, along with a plethora of other talent. So I'll name off a bunch of those guys. Michael Hirsch, Frank Parr, Michael Reeves, Carrie Bates, Steve Perry, among other names like that. So they were also integral for the show's development along the way. So Weissman did not return for Goliath Chronicles, but he did submit a script for the show's first episode, The Journey, which, because of his absence, was changed a lot. And so he considers the entire 3rd season not canon. So... But he's made it very clear over the years that he would want to come back and revisit the series at some point. So I think if Disney decides to do Gargoyles coming back, I don't think you're going to have to convince him all that much to come back. So let's get into it.
Very good. Yeah, I know Keith Davis said recently, he said that Goliath was one of the most enticing, richest characters he's ever worked on, and he would absolutely want to come back for it if Disney's open to doing it. So
awesome. That's one.
That's one. that's a very important one.
The lead character coming back. Yeah, kind of essential.
Yes.
So we all talked about watching the pilot before this first episode. Before doing this episode. What struck me watching the pilot again and knowing where the show goes is like I'm amazed at the amount of pipe that they laid very early on. Where like this person comes back and that person comes back.
I see what you're saying. When you watch the first episodes, he sets up a lot of character arcs that develop through the course of the series of the show, some of which you don't even realize until the 2nd season, in which it carries on well after the appearance of the main characters. Hell, the one of the main antagonists don't show up until the 3rd act of the premiere, so to speak. But interesting.
Be specific. Who are you talking about, though?
Demona doesn't come up until the end.
But we're talking about, when we say pilot, we're talking about the first 5 episodes, right?
Yeah. Which is worth pointing out. That it started out with a 5-episode pilot arc called The Awakening, which was a thing back then.
Yes.
5-episode pilots was a very common thing in cartoons in the 80s.
Well, actually, it was chopped up into 5 episodes. I remember when it debuted, it was actually a VCR game when he dropped.
Really?
In which, God, I want to say I had it, but I didn't, because I think I could have got it from Blockbuster, in which they showed it. But similar to what Clifton was saying, initially when cartoons dropped, you would see a movie, and then they chop it up into 5 episodes during the course of the week, so you can hungrily watch it every day for after school.
And it was common at the time, like, these were when these shows were being picked up with 65 episode season 1 orders before airing.
Right.
So you can devote 5 episodes and say, yeah, these 5 episodes are the pilot. Once season orders became shorter, that's when you started getting like 2-part pilots is a more common thing.
But DuckTales was one that did it. Thundercats was another one that did it.
Yeah. Thundercats was only 2 parts.
Well,
was it?
Yeah, Thundercats was only 2 parts opening.
Yeah, Exodus in part 1 and 2.
G.I. Joe had
That's right.
G.I. Joe had 2 miniseries. Plus a 3rd that actually started their first real season.
Yes.
Because the first 2 were the massive
Weather Dominator
second, and the one that actually started their season was Pyramid of Darkness.
Yes.
Which I
I'm
love.
trying to think of some of the other Disney ones. Did Chippendale?
Chippendale did, DuckTales did 5.
Yeah.
Tailspin?
Gummy Bears?
Tailspin, I can't remember. Gummy Bears, I don't think so.
Gummy Bears did not.
I'm ready to do an episode devoted to Gummy Bears.
Gummy Bears was an important precursor to the show, though, because I was doing research for this. Weissman originally had pitched this show as sort of an action comedy in the vein of Gummy Bears.
Really?
Like, he talks up Gummy Bears to this day.
Oh no, Gummy Bears
It's
is
a shared
great.
universe.
I love Gummy Bears.
That's my theory. I'm putting it out there.
All right.
That was kind of that was sort of the first basis for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, he pitched this show apparently 3 times.
I can
So
see
that was the thing. So this is Weissman's first actual foray as a producer.
Okay.
In this. Before that, he was a development executive where he would pitch shows to Disney all the time. Every so often, he'd pitch this, pitch that, but they would always buy 1 or 2 of them, and then he would, but this is the first one that was so close to, because he developed it 3 times and pitched it over and over again. He got so close to it that he made them essentially like, no, I want to actually do this one. They're like, you've never produced before. But he's like, okay, I never did this other thing before you hired me to do that. So let me produce.
Yeah. Gummy Bears is a favorite of mine. I can sing that theme song like no other. I'm sure all of us, if not at least half of us,
I was not a Gummy Bears guy. I mean, it was
blasphemy. Wow.
I mean, I've seen it. I'm
we
familiar
need to
with
hold
it.
you down and seal your eyelids open.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
I love
Disney
it.
Afternoon, I'm all about it, but I never Gummy Bears. I'm like, I didn't watch
Saturday
it.
morning.
Yeah, it was a Saturday morning. It was prime
NBC.
time for a cartoon.
Mm-hmm. God,
I was
love
not a
Gummy
Disney
Bears.
Afternoon guy. So I'm the one person at this table, I think, that discovered Gargoyles years after the fact.
I think I'm
was,
the one.
I was a Fox Kids guy. I watched Bobby's World and Eat the Cat and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
I think I'm the last of all this. I think I'm the last one to watch it.
Are you?
Entirely?
Possibly.
Yeah, I think I am because I didn't get to it till way late.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Was it after you found out about the Star Trek Generations cast?
No, you put me on. You were like, you need to watch Gargoyles. Watch Gargoyles. And you basically gave me Gargoyles to watch, and I watched Gargoyles. And then you were like, don't bother with season 3 because it's garbage.
Yes, to this day.
So I never watched it.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, rewatching the 5-parter, rewatching Awakening, you do see how much pipe they lay. You also see, the seeds that they plant.
Yes.
That basically, it's amazing to me when I look at it and think about the little bits that I'm like, well, this is going to develop into this, and surely we're going to see this character again, and this is a whole thing. And it's one of those things where when you write stuff and create stuff, you see that kind of thing like in comics all the time, where it's like someone who says. You go back and look at a first issue, you do a reread of something, and you can tell, again, well, I see, this is the potential to become this, or it eventually becomes that. And I'm always curious from a creative standpoint whether or not Weissman knew how much of it he had mapped out. Because, like, I remember telling you when we read that, it's in one of those Avatar, the Last Airbender art books, where the 2 guys.
Konechko.
Yes.
Yeah.
DiMartino.
Brian and,
yes.
Yeah.
They basically said that when they initially went into pitch Avatar, it was a lot different. There was a lot more. And then by the end of the pitch, they basically had laid out 3 seasons worth of what they wanted to do for the most part of like, this is our beginning and ending. And pitch meetings don't normally go that way because you don't want to give them everything that you have. Right. So it's one of those, I've always been curious about whether Weissman knew how much.
Well, you can see the pitch.
Yeah.
The pitch is online, and it's like a DVD extra on the first season. Which I don't know if it's the actual pitch he did to Michael Eisner, who was like the head of Disney at that time, like of everything, or if it was like a rehearsal that they just filmed over and over again. But
almost like a radio play.
You could see. No, I mean he's got art and everything like that.
Okay.
So like
mounted on boards.
Yeah.
Okay. Some early concept art.
Gotcha. So you've seen it too.
I have seen it as well.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it is really cool. But you Frank, you were going in a direction that I was thinking of too, because the first season's only 13 episodes, and if you look at the back cover of not the back cover, the inside flap of the season 2 DVD, which is how I saw the show. There's almost like a forward by Weissman on there where he's talking about. So we got picked up after the first season, and they were asking how many more episodes could we go, and then he was like, well, we can do another 13 easily, we can do maybe 16 if we push, and if we really, really push hard, we can do maybe 20.
Right.
And they were like, all right, you're picked up for 52. And then he was like, so immediately they started going into, we got to make this world bigger, we got to absolutely make this world bigger. So that's what I'm thinking about watching the first episode, was how much of this was intentional,
right, and
how much is this all right, we got to build this stuff out. So, okay, what can we go and mine? And okay, there's these 2 characters over here that we can end up using.
Let's give them an arc later.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, because when I think about that kind of stuff, I once had a conversation with Mark Waid about during Underworld Unleashed, and this is a spoiler for that book, but it happens in the first couple of pages, and it's 1,000,000 years old. But he kills off the Rogues Gallery from the Flash in like the first three or four pages of that book. And I remember asking him at the time when they did when they first introduced Prometheus in those one shots with villain one shots. He brings back the Rogues, and I asked him. I said, "Did you intend to bring back?" Kill them off and have that big moment and then bring them back for the book. And he was like, oh yeah, I totally planned on, he's like, no, he's like, it was a terrible mistake that I killed off the Rogues in that. I wanted a big moment for Underworld Unleashed. And then I realized the Flash needs,
somebody to
he kills off the entirety of the Rogues Gallery in that book.
He's the one that I buy that. Quick side note. So I heard an interview with him on Nerdist Writers Panel. So shout out to them. So Waid was there. They were talking about how much he has fleshed out. And he says that when he writes a cliffhanger to the episode, to an issue, that he doesn't know how he's going to get out of that when he does the next issue.
Right. I read that too.
And that's apparently that's just one of the ways he relaxes and stuff like that. Like in his time off, is he likes solving puzzles. So he likes kind of MacGyvering it and going.
Wow.
And his sense was like, if he doesn't know where it's going, you can't predict what he's going to do next. So he likes going into it with a little bit of, okay, like I got this power, what's the word I'm looking for? I got like this assortment of powers. I got this situation. So how's Daredevil going to get out of this?
Right, exactly.
So when he says that he didn't know that, I absolutely buy it.
I think it's terrifying to write that.
Yes! No, he says that too, though. He's like, first of all, I hate that Mark Waid. Right. When I get to when I sit down for that, like,
right.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, when we had the conversation at the time, he was like, oh no, it was kind of a, I needed to bring them back. I'm glad I was able to bring it back this way, that kind of thing. So.
Okay, no, but your realization or your information based upon that makes a lot of sense if you look back at the episodes on which they do. But having that many episodes, geez, you can definitely tell it's made the animation suffer. Because I'll tell you specific episodes in which it was like, wow, this was rushed. As opposed to those first 13, which look sharp, tight, colorful. I mean, you can see a sharp contrast in production value as opposed to the first 13. At least that's what I saw.
I mean, different studios
but
have different. I mean, the different overseas studios have.
No, I get that, but I just can't help but think that if it was a smaller season, that you wouldn't have to send it out to so many studios in order to keep that time schedule, especially during that era in which the 5 cartoons a week schedule prevailed, as opposed to now in which new episodes come and then they're done. And then you got to wait a couple months till the next new episodes come. Because I don't think, God, was it 20, was it 80s, 90s when they did it?
94.
94, yeah.
25 years this year, actually.
Yeah, it was part of that era in which how they debut cartoons. They don't do that anymore. At least not to my knowledge. I can't even recall the last cartoon that does that many episodes in that short of span of time. Probably hurt the longevity of the cartoon overall, because now you have cartoons that see 6 or 7 years.
It was a different marketplace. I mean, that was when shows were syndicated, like right from the green light.
Yeah,
and that was a big thing about it. And I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I know that was a big change between seasons 2 and 3. Okay. Was season 3 became like a network show, and standards and practices had like a little bit of more of a say over what happened in that. But the first 2 seasons were syndicated right from the get-go, where they sold it essentially to different markets over the around the country.
Well, that's a shame. Well, that's a shame, because I always thought that show was ahead of its time. The serialization of having a continual storyline and the characters evolving, you didn't see that in cartoons. You may have seen allusions to other things that certain ones did, but each one was a standalone episode in which they just moved forward with, what happened after this, but you can watch it in any order.
You didn't see it on TV all that often.
No, you didn't.
I would say.
No, you didn't.
At that point. Let alone cartoons. I mean, you're right. No cartoons really did it at that time.
Yeah, it was much more comic book styled, soap opera styled, serialized storytelling, which you didn't see. I mean, there was the point in time where you were getting some more sophisticated storytelling in animation. Batman the Animated Series had just been going a couple of years by that point. One that I've just had on my list as another 5-part pilot was Pirates of Darkwater around that time, which was pretty daring adventure series for the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was definitely like that's the early kind of vanguard of the more mature-ish storytelling. Just meaning like sophisticated stories, like not talking down to kids.
Yeah, sure.
Not just pandering for toys.
Right. Well, that's one thing that you also, in just reviewing some of the episodes you see about Gargoyles is the fact that there was a lot of issue, quote unquote, episodes, but they didn't have the same feel as like other cartoons where you're basically hammered over the head of like how you should feel. It wasn't like the more you know, or it wasn't like or it was
or the He-Man talking to you at the end of the episode, telling you what you learned.
It's okay to feel weird about your body. It's nothing like that. It was the episodes. It made sense why the characters were going through what they were going through, or what reacting and what had happened, and it just happened to be a bigger moral that was in the story that didn't necessarily. It wasn't. They were telling you a story while telling you a moral at the same time.
And those things had lasting effects too,
right?
So so you're talking about the gun episode,
that's the one, sure.
And Broadway has that like a version of the guns the rest of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you notice too, if you look at the series progression.
Well, what was the gun episode?
It was episode 8. I remember. And I'm trying to. What was the name of it? Deadly. Hang on. Consult the internet, everybody.
Yes. I was looking at this earlier.
I should have.
Deadly Force.
Deadly Force.
Thank you.
If you notice after the episode, she puts away her gun. So it was not only about gun violence, but
being responsible.
Yeah, gun ownership.
You can explain a little bit of the situation because I actually don't remember the episode.
Okay, no, but the episode starts off in which I'm trying to think the Burley one. Is
Broadway.
It Broadway?
Right.
Broadway's enamored by a movie or something.
TV show or some cop show or something.
But he's hyped up by it, and he goes to Elisa's house to talk about it more. And if I recall, as a result of it, she goes to sleep or something or steps away, but doesn't put her gun away. And Broadway sees and picks up and starts playing with it, acting like he's a cop or a detective, even as the hat on there, like from New Orleans or whatever.
Right.
But what makes it interesting is you hear the gun go off, and then I think Elisa drops or whatever, right?
Yes.
What's nice about it is Broadway doesn't immediately tell his clan what he did. So he has him and Goliath going to look out for who shot Elisa.
Right.
Until he actually confesses to doing it. And then you see what's nice is after the episode, you see his aversion to guns because every time a gun is present, he takes the time to break it up.
Yeah.
Exactly. But what another subtle thing is, Elisa never leaves it out. You always see action in which she puts it in a safe from that point forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's just a big message, not only to kids, but gun ownership responsibility.
Right.
Well,
not to cut you off.
No, that's all. No,
I mean, the other thing I liked about that episode is the fact that arguably the most childlike of the Gargoyles is the one that shoots her. And it's one of those things where, unfortunately, in situations where that stuff happens, it's not a kid being malicious or being evil. It's a kid playing with a gun or replicating. And it was done in a way that it made sense and it was plausible, but it also you could relate, a kid could recognize the fact that playing with guns is dangerous. And then as an adult, Elisa could also recognize the fact that having the gun out is just as dangerous because a kid has access to a weapon.
Right. Yeah. But the crazy part of that episode, it was banned.
Yeah.
After it was
That's
aired.
the other thing too.
They act like it never occurred. They tried to edit it up.
Yeah, they tried to edit it.
They did do an edited version of it where in the original broadcast you do actually see Mazza on the ground.
On the ground.
And there's blood.
Mm-hmm.
And then they when it switched networks or something, I think I could have this wrong, but they definitely zoomed in on the shot. And it was a shot of her face only at that for a while. And then you guys are saying it got cut entirely.
It got cut entirely for a while. It wasn't until it resurfaced in Disney's specific cable station that it came up.
Or when they brought it back for that or for something else?
No, I think for
it's uncut on the DVD.
Is it?
Too, yeah. So I mean, it whenever the show springs back up, I mean, this episode gets discussed which version is on. Disney Plus. I saw people online even talking about it. Which version is it? The edited version or
which version is it?
I think it's the unedited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but but again, it was well ahead of its time in what it developed and what it showed.
Yeah.
Because at first they were opposed to putting that on regular TV.
Right.
To the point that now it's like, no, go ahead, show it. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, but again, Gargoyles is another example of it being ahead of its time. in which when it came out,
literacy stuff too, like which
was
Broadway was also like the focal character for that. Where am I mistaken on that? I thought it was. I thought he was the one that got like really into reading.
No, it's not Broadway. It was Hudson.
Is it Hudson? Right. Okay. My mistake.
Yeah, because he was the oldest of the Gargoyles, in which he was ashamed of the fact that he couldn't read.
Right, never learned how.
Yeah, it was the episode "The Lighthouse in the Sea of Time."
He makes friends with a blind man.
Yeah.
Is it that episode?
And actually, he's the one that teaches him how to read as a result of his.
It's a good one.
That was a
really strong one.
Yeah, but it's nice because again, the character development. You see the character reading more or taking the time to look at stuff and examine it better as a result of it.
It gets him out of jams. I remember a couple of times where like he's got to like read something that the other ones don't know how to. Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things where I think that again with character development, you look at again getting back to like Avatar, Last Airbender, and the progression of those characters are from where they start off in the beginning to where they end up. That not only in design, I mean, design sense, you don't really get that in Gargoyles, but you definitely get, that's another one I point to that I'm like, the character development from the beginning to end constantly changes over the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so they refer, and it's one of the things where I think that Gargoyles does really well is the fact that, like I said, sometimes it's subtle reference to stuff that's gone on before, and sometimes it's like, no, it's like a full-on reference of what they've seen or what they've experienced. And I think a lot of cartoons, especially at the time, like your G.I. Joes didn't really, your Transformers, you didn't really do that sort of thing.
It's pretty much a reset button every time.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I mean, and you bring up Avatar, and those shows are all ones that are super special to me because that they're wholly original ideas. They're not based off of a manga or a comic book or
toy
candy.
Right.
Hey, that's fight towards gummy bears.
Right. No, but I mean, it's just like that's. We don't know which way to lean on the ride. Like these are all like for it to not be based on anything and to come up with a world like this lush in both those occasions, and Gargoyles and Avatar, and and I'll throw Dragon Prince in there right now. Who I absolutely put in that same category. I think that it's refreshing that we didn't get something that was so motivated by other things.
But I will say it wasn't 100% original like the other ones that you mentioned before, and just because of his lean towards Shakespeare. He did a heavy lean towards Shakespeare in a lot of his stuff. Not to say I didn't like it, but if you are accustomed to reading anything or even knowing a little hint of Shakespeare, I guess that's the way of bringing adults into it.
I think just when you compare that and say Spectacular Spider-Man, it's clear that he has a bent. He has a thing for Shakespeare, which isn't a bad thing at all.
I can't wait to do a look back on Spectacular Spider-Man. Also, I'm just saying,
but it's almost similar to how he did Spectacular with that first episode, where he like packs a lot of people who become their adversaries without initially even knowing it. And
I mean, he makes nods in Gargoyles, especially to Arthurian legend, and a ton and Norse mythology, a ton of other stuff.
That's mythology in general.
But my thing is that as we've talked about before with Young Justice and with Spectacular, those are reshuffles. Those are taking stuff that's already been established and putting your spin on it, or putting it out of order, or changing up how this person becomes Electro or that kind of thing. But I think again, the bigger thing with Gargoyles is even though it leans on Shakespeare or leans on mythology, it's still pretty much whole cloth. Its nucleus is a brand new idea.
Yeah. And even some of that Shakespeare stuff, it's
just more referential.
Not
adaptive. It is through a filter. Where like you do get like the three witches from Macbeth, and you do get like Banquo and stuff like that, but it's kind of put through like this, filter of that world.
No, you're right. You're right.
Almost as if like Shakespeare himself was inspired by those people.
Right? It's the right story.
It's kind of the sense.
I mean, even Demona is a reference to Desdemona. From Othello.
Yeah.
Real quick side: is there Shakespeare in Young Justice that I'm not thinking about?
Not that we know of, but but Zach was saying earlier he thinks that's more Vietti's vehicle as opposed to Weissman.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of that is
both of theirs.
No, I'm not saying it's not one or the other, but when you look at Spider-Man, you clearly see Weissman's print on it, largely as opposed to what you see with Young Justice. Like looking at his body of work over time, you can almost identify which is Weissman's and which is Vietti's as far as ideas and concerns are.
I think that the partnership with Vietti is a little bit different. I think he just found somebody that's incredibly like coachable.
Okay.
And learns from him really, really well, and then is able to kind of like also sometimes be the best idea in the room.
Yeah. But a lot of what Weissman does, he likes to deal with what's going on now, and he falls heavy into mature things. He doesn't shy away from having his characters deal with the aspect of who they are, like personality stuff. That's all Gargoyles was.
Yeah.
But what I love about Gargoyles is the gray in his characters. Like, there's the villains, but there's no true villains. They're motivated by a trauma or a larger consequence that they're trying to overcome. And then there's the sympathetic characters that do bad things based upon their ignorance of the situation. You clearly see that in Awakenings with the guy that's supposed to protect them, but makes a deal with the people that attack the castle just because the people in the castle are prejudiced.
Right.
The captain of the guards.
Yes, which is nice. And which I like how the extended part of that almost dooms him for God knows how many years as a result of the act that he did. And then there's Demona. God, you're talking about a tragic character.
I mean, she's one of the best characters easily in the show.
But I love how they take their time to develop to show you what happened in the past where City of Stone. City of Stone doesn't happen until 20 episodes in the second season.
It's early. I remember it's like first disc of the second season or something like that.
Yeah.
What's a disc?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Grandpa.
Yeah.
About that.
Well, I mean, but that's how I watched the show.
I know.
But I mean,
I did too.
Well,
some of it.
No. Watching the pilot again last night, I keep having the same thoughts that I forgot I had when I was watching it originally. And so, I think Xanatos is maybe the best version of Lex Luthor we've ever seen. On TV,
and Jonathan Frakes sells it.
He does. He's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should talk about that too, because the voice director of this is a guy who I think gets no love whatsoever at all. It's a guy named Jamie Thomason, who, he's worked with Weissman. He's on Spectacular Spider-Man. He's on Young Justice. I mean, I think he casts a good show.
Yeah.
We had a lot of Star Trek alum, a lot of great, rich voices on there. And I thought one of my favorite, one that I don't think gets talked about, Jim Belushi. Yeah. Was one of the, one of the mutate. He plays Fang. I remember. And I just thought, he's so good. He's so freaking good in this episode. And
I remember him now.
He just plays it in a way that it just seems like all those lines are just falling out of his head. At that moment. Yeah. And I remember thinking when we knew Weissman was doing Young Justice, I remember thinking, God, I hope, because he works with a lot of the same actors over and over again. I was hoping we were going to get Jim Belushi as Lobo. That'd be interesting. Right? Yeah. We didn't. Not that, I mean, the guy that plays Lobo's awesome, but I mean, he was my first choice. I was hoping, but
no, you're right. The voice cast on that is nice. Sally Richardson is Elisa Maza. She's nice as well.
Ed Asner, Hudson.
Yes, Hudson. You also have what's his name as Puck?
Brent Spiner.
Brent Spiner. That's nice how he plays that. I think, but that's someone else.
Clancy Brown.
Yeah, Clancy.
But what's nice, how he uses Clancy Brown. He uses him as two different characters. He uses Clancy Brown.
And you find there's a reason why.
Yeah, and it's nice because you think he's using the character again. It's being cheap, but it's nice how he weaves it back to the plot of the
Marina Sirtis.
She's
awesome. Oh yeah, she's definitely so.
You got Michael Dorn. In some episodes, was he Cold Stone? What was his name?
Cold Stone.
Was it Cold Stone?
The amalgamation of certain gargoyles.
Yes,
but I love how they weave science into it. I have this, the Awakenings. The first 5 episodes. I love how everything they do comes back to that same time frame.
Yes,
in which it centralizes their. It's like the greatest and worst part of their lives. And they can never escape from it. It's like every time the story goes a little bit further, you see how it all comes back to that one period in which genocide that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Back in 994 AD.
AD.
Right.
Yes. But yeah,
it's sophisticated for sure. It's not the normal thing you would see in a kids cartoon at all. That point. But but Clifton, I mean, you brought up Batman the Animated Series, and I think that absolutely, I think that we don't get Gargoyles if Batman the Animated Series didn't come along first and kind of show, oh wait, like we're gonna kind of take these characters, I don't want to say seriously, but like we're gonna make it dramatic, you know, and just kind of took it to another level. Not like you will not find a bigger Batman the Animated Series fan than me, I promise you. But I mean, those are mini movies essentially. What I love about Gargoyles is like we were saying, it's completely serialized, and I think that that's something that Weissman like really does best. I think his strength as a writer is that, like, really thinking big picture.
But isn't this the first time where Disney goes into forever an action cartoon, basically? I mean, can you think of another action cartoon Disney has done other than, well, I take that back. Kim Possible is the closest thing I can.
Right. They've done some later.
Yeah, much later. But look at the time frame of that.
I saw an interesting quote researching this, looking back at it, where they liked the idea so much that they were thinking of Gargoyles as kind of like Fantastic Four, sort of like the property that launches
an action universe
like a universe for them.
Huh.
And so and if you look at Ask Greg, which is he has a website that
blog,
he takes fan questions, which is, if you're into the show or into his work, it's, you know, hours of entertainment, because I mean he'll talk about anything.
Yeah, on his blog. But I was going to interject this. The fan following that is immense. There was a convention called The Gathering that happened every year after the show's demise, in which people would get together to talk or even dress up as those characters for several years before it finally took a close to what it did.
Yeah.
So, again, I reiterated, I can't think of too many action cartoons that came out of Disney. Yeah. Like I said, Kim Possible. Can you guys think of anything else that was action oriented? But no,
I mean, Kim Possible was still a few years later.
Yeah, like 5 years.
Gargoyles.
I mean, there was action in shows that but it was more like
cartoonish action.
It's cartoonish action. It's comedy, and then
always comedy first.
Comedy, right?
Rescue Rangers,
Darkwing,
but it wasn't really.
Darkwing's probably the closest they got. And that was still comedy.
Yeah, it was still comedy.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't think Gargoyles. I mean, there was funny moments, but at no point did I mistake that for a comedy.
Right. Again, like you said, it's almost, again, not to get back to Avatar, but it's almost the idea of, there's, genocide happens in both of them.
Yeah, it does.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have genocide is like in the opening, in the opening episodes.
Yeah, it's
when you stop to think about it, the Gargoyles get wiped out, in that first episode by Clancy Brown's character, and then you have the same thing with the Airbenders, and there's a reason why he's the last one.
Yeah.
At that point is because. And that's for a kids cartoon. That's
hard.
I mean, it's heavy enough for adults, much less for kids. I mean, granted, they don't put a stamp on it. They don't say, "Hey, kids, I'm letting you know that this is what's going on." But
you do see them in like rubble with arms sticking out.
Right.
In retrospect, it's very dark.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. It's one of those things where outside of like Disney's quote unquote dark period, it's one of those things where it's very much a atmospheric show that definitely is outside the norm of what they were usually doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is coming in right at the end of like Tailspin and DuckTales and Rescue Rangers and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, and I would even say, like, to this day, I still think haven't done anything on TV, at least, that was remotely close to this.
No.
As far as sophistication, right? Because even Kim Possible, I'll say, is Kim Possible predominantly
right. It's more comedy. It's a more comedy action.
Yeah.
Just with a lot of heart.
Yeah. Oh no, I love Kim Possible. Weissman wrote for that too. He was a freelance writer for that. Yeah. But no, I mean, going back to, I really think though that's his strength, is just thinking big picture and like the sense that you'll never really get a last episode from him ever, because he's always like setting up more story and setting up more story.
But one thing, there are people that are really good at setting up, hey, this is what I'm thinking of. There's obviously more story because the story really never ends in your in your world or your universe that you create. But the idea is that it's definitely one of those shows that sets stuff up, but man, it pays stuff off as well.
Yeah.
Like that's something I think a lot of shows don't realize, is you can only string people along with your your bullshit story
Yeah.
without paying it off. You have to pay it off, otherwise people get fatigued by the fact that there is no, there's all that thing of like, again, it gets back to story structure, the idea of the rising action, and you have to have a climax, and then it begins to go down, and then you build it back up again.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those cartoons again that really does pay off a lot of its story in really satisfying ways.
It's thinking back to what I said about when they renewed it for season 2 and it got such a huge order that we got to think how to make the world bigger.
Right.
We were talking in another episode how sometimes you get like writers that don't know how big their story should be and everything. And I can't think of a scenario where like the show's better in season 2, I think. Like it's better for all that stuff that they weren't prepared for, that they had to flesh out, I think.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, I think it definitely, it benefits from the fact that there's breathing room to allow for stuff to develop.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, a lot of the stuff that dovetails back in, back to what, the main story is, or where the main focal point of the story is, as we were saying earlier, was just the fact that you have those moments where 994,
right,
is the flashpoint. It's a focal point of like,
year 994.
Yes, the year, right? Yeah. Is the moment where everything, you can point. Basically, it all goes back to that.
Right.
No matter what, pretty much you can draw a straight line from everything back to it. And I think that's important from from that cataclysm event for them, that it's never too far from the main story.
No, it does. Yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying too. Not that specific, but like it doesn't feel like stalling at any point.
Not at all.
Right. Like,
right.
Yeah, I mean, no, breathing room is a good way of putting it. Like stuff is given time to sort of to marinate, to come to a boil, essentially.
I think if you're talking like a live action, I think like other shows that I think of that paid off as well, like Battlestar Galactica.
Sure.
The Ron Moore stuff, I think, was one of those that basically would set stuff up, and you get a couple episodes, and then it would pay off, and then it set stuff up, and then you get a couple episodes, and it'd pay that off. And there wasn't a lot of filler, the stuff that they wrote. And I don't feel that way with Gargoyles. I can't really think of Gargoyles, that episode that I'm like, they phoned that one in.
No, I can't either. I mean, the one I guess like critical thing that I'll say about it is it's so serialized. It's a hard show to talk about, and because I think as writers, it was really hard to juggle sort of the serialized stuff and give each episode like an individual identity. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, and I think Weissman as a producer and a showrunner got better with that in other series. Like Spectacular, I think, does it beautifully. Where like, that's absolutely a serialized show and stuff builds and builds and builds in it. But those episodes feel like this is Sandman's return episode. And this is when Venom comes episode. Back. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it feels I don't want to say one and done, but it feels like, I remember that's the Colonel Jupiter one. Sure. Right. And it has like an identity of that. And Gargoyles, I think, does not quite have that. But what I'll say is I think they even got better at that as it was going. Because like after you get to the Avalon like 3-parter and they start doing like the world tour stuff, like those episodes feel like that. Like this is Goliath in ancient Egypt, and this is Goliath in
Easter Island,
World War II and stuff like that. Yeah. Right. And so I think he gets better at that. But I mean, that's what makes it's what makes talking about it so hard. Is that they kind of run together a little bit.
I think I don't know if I go with they run together. I think it more. I was going to say what you're thinking about. My thought was I think that more than any of the series that he's done, I think that one flows better.
I agree. But the reason why it flows better, it comes to a specific point in what they're trying to do. Beforehand, it almost felt like a villain of the week, in which something would occur and they deal with it end. But when they're going at Gargoyles World Tour, they flesh out their world. You only get the sense of mythology with other gargoyles. They let them feel like they're not the only one in the world, but you also get the magic and the mythology and what it encompasses. You get Avalon's children, in which all those fairies or whatever you want to call them, whether it's the Golem or even Odin, who's a part of that mythology. You get an understanding of how big it encompasses. And then it builds inclusion. It's different mythologies of different parts of the world. You get Indian mythology, you get Brazilian mythology, you get Japanese mythology.
Indigenous American,
Yeah, exactly. And all of them are solid ideals and myths or whatever you want to call it that people really believed in at one point. And it builds their world to make sure they're part of the third race is the fairies, in which they said the gargoyles were second. It just gave a better understanding of the world itself and what he was trying to create, as opposed to here's some guys that were lost in time, like Buck Rogers, so to speak.
Yeah, but those are all the later episodes, though. I mean, that's what I'm saying, is that as it went on, they got better at that sort of thing. So I would say, for me, Unfolding was, I think, spectacular. Was like the leanest show and unfolded, I think, the best, because it did have, like I said, that serialized component, but everything had like its one and done. Where I don't want to sound like I'm being unfair to Gargoyles, because I love it, and saying running together is sort of overtly negative, and I don't mean that. But what I mean is that, like, there's a lot of the same set pieces in a lot of the early episodes, and then like the first half of season 2, and it just makes it a little bit harder to distinguish them, right? Until the second half, where, like I said, it's easier because this is. Right, this is the Japan episode, right?
Well, the first 13, everything happened in New York. In the second one, New York and Scotland, because they kept going back to that time back in 995. But in the second one, like you said, Japan, Brazil, Arizona. That raft gave them a reason to move it out of New York. Because God help me, everything happened in New York. It felt like Marvel. If a crime occurred, even when they brought King Arthur, why is King Arthur in New York? You know, But I get what you're saying as far as how it grew together, because it was an overall theme. If you want to compare it to Spider-Man, it was when the Goblin became obsessed with him, in which everything focused on the Goblin and his dealing with the Goblin. It stopped becoming, again, the villain of the week, in which you actually had an arc, which he dealt with something specific. That's how I saw the world tour aspect of it, which all led to The Gathering, which was
I don't think villain of the week. I mean, I may be reading into. I'm perceiving like you saying like villain of the week is a bad thing, though, and I don't see villain of the week as a bad thing. Like, I like that. There's nothing
wrong with it, but it condenses it in that one area, in which it's like, for some reason or another, you're in the worst place in the world. Yeah. Where there's other places, other things that happen around the world in which you might be needed there, but it gave it a reason for them to be there, as opposed to, again, like I said with Marvel, for some reason or other, New York is the worst place in the world because that's where all crimes and villains converge out, and you have to be there in order to be a superhero. Right. But in the second half of Gargoyles, you get the feeling of they exist. That's why all these things are happening to them, as opposed to I'm in New York. So I got to deal with crime bosses. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was, I think a lot of why Gargoyles, resonated so well for me was the fact we were talking about earlier, was the fact that it's not, I mean, unlike Spectacular Young Justice, I knew where to lean. Right. Most of the time. Yeah. I'm every now and then they would slip something and then it's fan service, or there'd be a bit where I'm like, oh, that's cool. That, I didn't realize that was that, or, they'd have somebody for a moment, Right. And then it would go. But with Gargoyles, I always felt like no matter what they were doing, whether it was like, even when they're in the world tour stuff, I felt like, okay, they're expanding their world and they're giving me more of what other gargoyles or other characters are like in other parts of the world, right? Right. But at the same time, I thought they were really good about turning over cards with the characters themselves. Right. Either putting them in a situation or making them, have moments or bits. And again, up until that point, you only know what you've been told through the earlier episodes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is no point of reference other than the early episodes. For your, sometimes you don't know what the character's thinking until they say it. That's one of the things I liked about Gargoyles, because it was newly and whole cloth something else, as opposed to, well, I know that clearly that Max Dillon's going to become Electro. I know that Eddie Brock at some point is going to get a Venom costume. It's what I mean? It's a different sensation watching it. I mean, for me, Spider-Man, what's, and I don't want to make it too much about that, but what's interesting about it is seeing sort of how all of that stuff's like weaved together, and how he's taking things from different eras and kind of making it all play with each other, right? Because Venom and Dr. Octopus are separated by how many years, publication wise, but they're in the same season. Mm-hmm. Right. They're introduced in the same season. Yeah. And like, I like that, but that is a different sensation from
where's this going to go next? I don't know anything about these characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outside of maybe I know the Shakespeare play. And even that's necessarily not even a tell of where it's going to go.
Yeah. That's just a touch. For me, that was just like a touchdown of like what Shakespeare that I knew and read. I'm like, okay, that's cool that he's incorporating some of the stuff. Like when you see like the witches from Macbeth, I'm like, that's cool. Mm-hmm. But I always had the thing also that you were saying, Tommy, the idea that, you felt like these were characters that existed and all that Shakespeare did was take notes,
Right.
He just wrote down the story like, well, this is what I witnessed. So this is what happened. So, but they were actual full flesh and blood. It's almost like kind of like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The idea that these characters are all these Shakespeare characters are sort of in a shared universe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They all exist at the same time, just in different parts of England or whatever, or Scotland or Ireland or wherever.
But I like how he weaves it into being Oberon's children. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Oberon is old as dirt. Right. So you have all these characters or imagery or kids or whatever you want to call them existing through Oberon, regardless of how they came to be. One thing I like too is how to develop the characters. Like of the Gargoyles, you had specific types. Like what you said, which is Broadway. He was a childlike one, always eating. Yeah. Lexington became the techie person because
he was always interested in machines right from the start.
And then Brooklyn, what became the quip, the sullen teenage angsty.
Well, it
kind of like the reluctant leader.
Yes,
when he was Goliath was gone.
Yeah,
doing the world tour stuff.
Yeah, but I was just like how, and then also you get certain rivalries with certain people with certain gargoyles. Mm-hmm. This one hated this one didn't like this one. Like for example, when Damona tricked Brooklyn, every time Brooklyn came in the room, he felt the need to hit her first or feel the rush to beat her ass just because of what he did to her. It made him lose sight of the bigger picture.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like too how he made like the gargoyles feel like a real species.
Yes.
With like a culture.
Yes.
So like Goliath and Damona, when they're involved in the Scotland stuff, like you never see them kiss because that's not what they do.
Yeah, that's not what they do.
Like their thing is that they embrace and they like rub each other's hair and stuff like that. And like I never noticed that. That was pointed out to me like in a commentary or something like that. But I thought that was interesting. And I like that, their eyes are glowing and stuff like that. And Damona's eyes were red because she was the bad guy, but they didn't want to like tip their hat that she was going to be the bad guy. So they made it to like, no, just the females all have their eyes red. So like Angela comes along later on, like same thing. Her eyes are red.
I didn't know. Wow. That's wrong. Yeah, I didn't know that as well. Right. I just thought she was just related to Damona. That's why she was
red. Yeah.
And I like that it's just there. It's not given so much like, hey, like we're putting time into this stuff. I just like that it's just there, and if you catch it, great, and if not,
oh well.
Well, that was something I did notice when you were talking about before we talked about gargoyles, and you had mentioned something about they're immigrants, right? And they're coming to New York, and the idea. What I thought was really cool watching it again this time was the idea that it's mentioned in the past that like, well, we don't have names. Goliath has a name, but we don't have a name. When it's like, hey, friend,
Yeah.
And then when they basically make the journey, not of their own willing, like there's almost like a slave metaphor there that they don't.
Oh, very much so. Ellis Island.
Yeah, and they go to Ellis Island and they don't really have names before that, and then when they get there, they choose new adopted American names, which is interesting.
Yeah, new identities.
And they take on new names for their new life in this new country.
Yes.
Which again is also something that's they don't hammer you over the head with it, but they definitely do.
Yeah, introspective.
That's a good point. Yeah, I never thought of that.
Oh, big time.
Because when the very first part is when Hudson's like, okay, fine, I'm Hudson.
Yeah.
After he doesn't expect the river to have a name. Right. He's like, do you name the river?
Yeah.
Well, she said it's called the Hudson. Yeah. He's like, call me that.
All right, fine, I'm Hudson. So, but I noticed that was something I noticed from what you said before, which is I noticed that whole idea of like, well, that's again the Ellis Island and being immigrants, you could almost, like I said, almost make it a slave metaphor. The fact that they don't really their old identities don't matter anymore, and now they're taking on these new identities.
Yeah,
right.
For this new start in this new quote unquote world.
Yeah. I like all the fact of what Xanos was tricking like a typical immigrant. Like since you're not above this world, I know it's a person at a time, but it's the whole thing of you're the first one I'm meeting, so I'm trusting you despite your overall agenda. And I like the stubbornness with it because their old world beliefs still pervade in this new era in which it's almost to their detriment that they have to move on and be better than what have you learned from the past that's hurting you now, basically. Understanding that this is not the world you in, even though you have strong moral conviction, it'll save you and hurt you all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I mean, certain aspects of it. I mean, how he treats those characters, it's nice or enjoyable to have that sense of foundation that they don't deviate from, you know?
No, yeah, exactly. Like, it's amazing that like he doesn't like I was saying with like the kissing stuff, like that stuff's like never contradicted.
No,
anymore.
It's not.
Like they're careful about like they're maybe more careful than most shows of mining like what happened before and being like, we can't do this because this screws this up.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's meticulously put together. And like, I mean, I would put this show right up against any live action show. I really would.
Yeah.
I really, really would.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you're not talking more about Xanatos.
Actually, Damone is my favorite character.
Really?
To me, they watered down Xanatos towards the end.
Yeah.
Just how he gives in and changes his spirit, which is nuts. I get it for his child that they help, but Damona, wow. She changes, but not in a sense of what you want her to change, because she's still the same person from the first one where she hates the humans. But ironically, she works with humans the most over a given part of time.
That's what I was going to say when you were bringing up the idea of like, okay, they're fresh. The base of the Gargoyles are fresh off the boat, right?
Yes, exactly.
And Xanatos is the one who's like, no, really, I'll look out for you and help you.
Yeah, I got you.
But you can tell like Damona was like, I'll throw in the humans to get my agenda across. I have no problem.
Yes.
We didn't even talk about Macbeth. Like that's another like like fantastic character that, you know, tied in with Damona, like
Sean Connery.
Street.
Yeah, they lean heavy with that accent. Jeez. Yeah. I find it funny that they're all from Scotland, but he has the sharpest, hardest Scottish accent out of the bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Played by Sala from Indiana Jones.
Really?
Yeah.
I never looked that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I just love the accent.
Which I think it's funny that he's with Sean Connery in Last Crusade, and I'm like, oh, and he's doing Sean Connery on the show.
On the show,
yeah, he's a monarch of the sea.
Yeah.
Really?
John Rhys Davies.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Macbeth.
He's a great character.
Macbeth. Oh my God.
Oh, no, I love Damona.
Great character.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah. Gosh, it's just. I love the end of the City of Stone, which the Weird sisters, the witches, chronologize her life and what she blames other people, and then they pull it back on her. Well, who did this? And then she switches the topic to go to another person. They're messed up. Well, who led them to do this?
But it's funny. That's a callback again. Watching the Awakening, that's a callback to Goliath, because she's like, remember, she tells Goliath from that point, like, listen, if you had just gone, we had made a deal, everything was going to be fine, and you just didn't listen. And he's like, no, it's your fault.
Yeah. You made the deal.
You made the deal, and she doesn't want to hear it.
The coolest story I have about pushing Gargoyles onto somebody is I took a Shakespeare class.
Okay.
When I went back to school, and we had to do like this oral presentation, and so I was doing mine on like Shakespeare and other media.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of that, I used clips from Spectacular Spider-Man and Gargoyles to kind of show them, because I showed them a Spider-Man clip that made everybody go like, what the hell? Why is he showing a Spider-Man in the Shakespeare class? And then it cuts to them doing the auditions. And the auditions are all like quotes from Shakespeare monologues, and it like perfectly lines up with what is happening in the episode.
Yes, it does.
And then I went into like the Weird Sisters stuff like that from Gargoyles and City Stone stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my teacher going like, what show was that? I'm like, it's Gargoyles, like, you know, ran in the 90s. And she's like, you know, just jotting that down like in her notes, like Gargoyles. And she got into it. My professor got into it. So yeah, no, that's my coolest story about pushing it onto somebody.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But like, so the Ask Greg website, one of the things I remember reading him saying was that if the show had gone on long enough, he had plans for like introducing all kinds of mythology and like using more characters from Arthurian legend and stuff like that. So he's like, we just ran out of space. Like, you know,
you remember you gave me that book that was signed. And that was a spinoff too. Was it Villains? Was it Bad Guys? Bad Guys. Yeah. That's a great spinoff an idea.
It is.
Another one was the Olympians.
There are many of them. So going back to what I was saying, where they were like they kind of saw it as Fantastic Four setting up like a universe of stuff. Like he had a ton of spinoff ideas that he pitched his shows, and Bad Guys was one of them. That ended up becoming a comic book.
Yeah. And
he sort of ended up doing kind of like a season 3 in the comics also called Clan Building. There's 2 volumes of that, which I think are out of print. But it's all really good. But it's all really good. And like, so really, really good stuff. But I mean, like I said, you can play around on his site and just see like he talks about like he's not going into spoilers for anything, but like he goes more in depth of like this is the what I had in mind for the hunters, and this is what I had in mind for the quarrymen and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I wish the show
he did the quarrymen because that's season 3 stuff.
So that was in his script for the first episode.
Of course it was.
So I mean, the tragic thing is that like he saw the writing on the wall, and essentially season 3 came along, and all those, and he knew they were all getting kind of like pushed out the door.
Okay.
And so I think Carrie Bates was the only writer that stuck around, and none of the other like producers that knew the show or knew where there was going to go. So all these new people came on board, and they had to sort of like find their way.
Okay.
And that's sort of why Goliath Chronicles kind of goes off in its weird other tangent.
Yeah.
But he does sort of like a retelling of the journey in those comics.
Okay.
If you can find those. But
another thing I got to look that's not in trade.
Oh, great show. Great show. So to wrap up though, so if the show does come back, let's say that, what are our expectations? What are we hoping? I mean, it's a long time.
Well, to me, the first thing, it's going to be a time skip.
Yeah, the present day.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
I want to 2019.
Yeah. I want to see who's...
With Mazza, like 50-year-old.
That's
grizzled.
Yeah, that'll be sad.
With Goliath, who's only aged maybe slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's... because I think at one point it said Gargoyles age 3 times slower than humans. And at that point they made that known in the series. So
she doesn't have to be one of the Golden Girls. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but
she can be spry.
Yeah, but it leaves the whole thing of he might be with her daughter or that type of deal.
No, he's with her.
Wow, no,
Sharon Carter, Agent Carter,
not romantically. Yeah, just because
partnered up. Yeah,
sure. Thank you. Sure. Jeez,
like solving crime.
Thank you, because. Because if Goliath was in his youth during that part of time, so he'd be
their
more
daughter, right?
Whose daughter?
It'd be their daughter, the two of them.
You mean Angela?
No, it'd be Goliath and Mazza's daughter.
No.
I don't know if that works.
No, I think so. Hybrid? No, we meet half breeds, don't we?
No.
Yeah, we do.
They lay eggs.
No, I'm pretty sure we meet a half breed.
They lay eggs.
We know what Zach wants to say.
No,
they're not compatible. I don't know. Okay, all right. They lay eggs.
You have to look this up. I don't know.
They lay eggs.
I understand, but I think what I'm saying is I think they already set it up. I think they've already told us it can happen.
but to me, okay.
So that's not on Tommy's
list. I'm only dismissing it because they don't reproduce the same way.
Right.
That's all. That's just like saying.
We have to look into it.
That's just like saying if I live with a bird long enough, I'll have bird children.
Bird person.
Yeah.
I think they do.
But to me, if they do that, that's Savarius and stuff with the genetic splicing.
To be fair, we've seen that kind of stuff go on in the series, and we've seen enough magic and enough science that it's not so beyond the realm of possibility that it could happen.
No, but they make out like.
No, I'm not saying they don't love each other. I'm not disputing the romance. What I'm saying is they're not genetically compatible. They're a different race. On top of that, they took their eggs to go hatch. I don't recall any human having eggs.
Right.
That's why. I'm not dissuading what you want to occur. He's not
going to lay the eggs. She's going to give birth. Not him.
I just think
it's just even weirder.
My thing is that obviously it's their romances. I think it was heavily influenced by the
Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah,
show.
The show, very much so. That show had a big hand in. Okay, I understand you're skeeved out by it, but I'm just saying the Linda Hamilton and Ron Perlman show very much influenced those two characters, the Goliath and Eliza stuff. That it was very much a play on that. That it was that people looked at that series like, okay, this is what we want it to be, and it's apparent that obviously they're affectionate toward each other and they have a thing. But whether or not we're going to get a magic or scienced baby or offspring between the two of them, We could.
Right.
I don't know.
Tommy's
There's
cringing.
ways.
Yes,
there are ways.
God.
There are ways.
Visibly, you can't, no one can see it, but he's
That's all I'm
visibly
saying.
cringing.
Oh.
There are ways.
Gotcha. There are ways.
There are ways.
Yes.
Excuse.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yes.
What about, so this is, it's a 25-year-old show. What about the show visually? Because animation's come a long way.
Oh, it's gonna be amazing.
And I think, well, okay, but this is the thing. So for me, when a show comes back, I appreciate when it looks a little bit like what I remember it to be. This is like, so I give Samurai Jack a lot of credit for not evolving the show too much. Right. And when Young Justice came back, like Phil Barrasa's style has changed over time. And what I like about Young Justice is that he's not doing the movie style. He's doing the show style.
Right.
Like he's got the proportions back and everything. So, I mean, this show is not going to just be like season 3, season 4. This is going to be a relaunch, but I'm just curious, like what you guys think visually, like how much. I don't even know if a show could look like that.
That style is not being made in animation today.
I mean, it's
just not.
It's a lot of painted backgrounds. It's just not
beautifully painted backgrounds.
No, don't get me wrong.
And to me, it depends on what they take with the show. We may not even get the same characters. You may get a new generation as a result of it, like what you say with your hybrids.
Probably.
Yeah. So,
or just more of hatched.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to entail is it's almost as if it'll give them the initiative to create a different style because we're seeing a new incarnation of the series.
Yeah.
So you won't so much adhere to the old one. You'll just see it as a new envisioning of the series, so to speak, which makes it different or makes the other one aged. It could be like kid stories, basically.
Right.
It's not a reimagining of the series. It's just moving forward. Correct? Is that what I'm?
That's what I want from it. I don't want it to be a
retelling of what we've already seen
or a reimagining. Or I almost think that it has to be a very much a demonstrative, much like in the year 994, something horrible happened. Right. It has to be along those lines of something happens, and this is where we're picking up the story again. Even if they've gone their separate ways or they're disparate, they're no longer a clan, they're no longer together, what have you. I'm all for, yes, these episodes in the 94 to 97 stuff happened, but I don't need it to be, like you said, I don't need to be season 3 and season 4. It's perfectly fine if we get the time jump and then it's basically picking up where their stories would be at this point.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know he's got ideas. Like I said, you play on his website. He's got plenty of ideas. I don't know. I mean, I think the time has passed for some of that stuff. But I mean, I know he had some cool stuff with like Brooklyn and, and time travel related stuff.
Yeah, Lexington too. Oh, I remember the Brooklyn one. That was the future stuff, right? Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So, I hope it happens. I hope keep binging Gargoyles.
If you want to see it back, keep binging.
Yes.
And start binging Gummy Bears, Frank.
Will do, yes.
It's on Disney Plus.
How could you hate Gummy Bears?
I didn't hate it. I just didn't watch it.
That's worse.
Okay.
It's exciting that it's like finally able to be streamed someplace, because I mean this was not an easy show for me to watch, because I had a DVD for season 1, then the season 2 DVD came out a year later, and then there was like
a year.
Then there were 6 years in between. It was like, so season 2 was released in halves, and it was like 6 years. So I had to like figure out how to see the rest of the season 2. I had to, like, luckily, unfortunately, I will say also that somebody pirated it and put it on YouTube, and that was how I had to watch it, because there's no other way. I mean, but now that Disney Plus has it out, it's cool that people can watch the whole thing in one shot
in good quality.
Yeah, in good quality.
And Clifton, I think you were telling me that like a coworker of yours was showing it to his son who was 8 years old, and he's loving it, which is
he's been
great.
Binging it all weekends.
Yeah, it's
very cool.
It's not just a nostalgia thing; it's still working.
No,
it's still working on kids today. Yeah. So I hope it does come back. So with that, should we sign off? All right, cool. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Dashing and daring, courageous and caring, faithful and friendly with stories to share. All through the forest they sing out in chorus, watching along as their song fills the air. Gummy bears, bouncing here and there and everywhere. High adventure that's beyond compare. They are the gummy bears. Magic and mystery are part of their history, along with the secret of gummy berry juice. The magic is flowing. They take pride in knowing. That's all I can remember. That's the best you'll get out. I love that stupid show.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, I love that show.
Oh, that was awesome.